I walked out of $1 million mansion at 4 in the morning with nothing but the clothes on my back and my dead husband's wallet. And when I finally used his old bank card 3 days later, the manager's face went white as a sheet, and he said 5 words that changed everything. "Your husband predicted this?" Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now, back to my story. My name is Helen Wright. I'm 64 years old, and 3 days ago, I escaped from my own daughter's house like a fugitive running from the law. No money, no identification, no phone, just a worn leather wallet that belonged to my husband Thomas, who died 4 years ago from lung cancer that ate him alive while our daughter barely bothered to visit. I never thought I'd use anything in that wallet again. I kept it hidden in the back of a drawer because opening it felt like tearing open a wound that refused to heal. But when you reach the point where dignity is the only thing you have left, when your own child has stolen everything from you, including your identity, you do things you never imagined possible. I'm going to tell you exactly how I ended up here, how a woman who built a fashion empire from absolutely nothing ended up running from her own blood like a criminal in the night, and how my Thomas, from wherever his soul rests now, saved me when I needed him most. But first, you need to understand something about me. I am not weak. I never was. I was born in rural Tennessee, where opportunity was a word people used to describe places that weren't there. My mother was a seamstress who could make magic with fabric and thread but never made enough to feed us properly. My father worked himself into an early grave at a factory. I was the oldest of 4 girls, and at 19 I left home with $30 in my pocket, a suitcase full of handmade dresses, and a dream everyone said was foolish. I wanted to create beautiful, affordable clothing for women who deserved to feel special even when their bank accounts said they weren't. I started selling my designs at weekend flea markets. I woke up at 4 in the morning to claim the best spots. I slept in my car when I couldn't afford a room. I ate 1 meal a day and saved every single penny like it was the last dollar on earth. In 5 years, I had enough to open my first small boutique in a working-class neighborhood. In 10 years, I had 4 locations. In 20 years, Wright & Company was a recognized name across the South. That success didn't come from luck. It came from bleeding myself dry. It came from sacrificing sleep, comfort, relationships. It came from saying no to everything except the work. My friends thought I was obsessed. Maybe I was. But I knew what poverty tasted like, and I was never going back. I met Thomas when I hired his accounting firm to handle the finances for my second store. He was quiet, methodical, kind in a way that felt rare. He had soft eyes that actually listened when you spoke, and he never once tried to mansplain my own business to me like so many men did. He believed in my vision when banks wouldn't give me loans because I was a woman. He worked late nights helping me organize financial projections. He never asked for anything except my time. It took him 8 months to convince me to go on a date because I didn't mix business with my personal life. But he was patient, persistent. And one night after a meeting that ran until nearly midnight, he looked at me across the table covered in spreadsheets and said, "Helen, if you don't have dinner with me right now, I'm going to assume you're afraid of me." I laughed. God, I laughed for the first time in months. And we went to a diner that served breakfast at midnight, and I knew he was the one. We married a year later. Small ceremony. 30 people. Nothing flashy, because Thomas said love isn't measured by the size of the party but by the strength of the promises. He was right about everything. He always was. We had 1 child, a daughter, Claire. And that's where my biggest mistake began, though I didn't see it until it was far too late. Claire grew up with everything I never had: private schools, dance lessons, summer camps in Europe, designer clothes. I wanted her to lack nothing. I didn't want her to feel the gnawing hunger I felt as a child. I didn't want her working herself to exhaustion at 19 like I did. I wanted to give her every opportunity that was denied to me. But here's what I didn't understand, what Thomas tried to warn me about, and I refused to hear. When you give a child everything without them working for anything, you don't create a grateful adult. You create an entitled one who believes the world owes them everything simply for existing. Claire never worked in the boutiques. I wanted her to study, to become educated, to have options. She went to an expensive private university and got a degree in fashion design. I thought she'd join the business, bring fresh ideas, maybe even take over one day. But she never practiced. She said the industry was too competitive, that people were jealous of her last name, that she needed to find herself first. Thomas told me to let her figure it out on her own, to stop funding her endless soul-searching. But I couldn't. I didn't want her to struggle. I didn't want her to suffer. So I kept writing checks, kept making excuses, kept enabling. Years passed. Claire had jobs that lasted weeks, maybe months if we were lucky. There was always an excuse. The boss was incompetent. Her coworkers were threatened by her. The work was beneath her capabilities. And she always came back asking for money. And I always gave it. Thomas would look at me with those sad, knowing eyes and say, "Helen, you're not helping her. You're crippling her." But I didn't listen. That was my greatest failure as a mother. Not that I worked too much. Not that I missed some school plays or dance recitals. But that I loved her so much I destroyed her ability to stand on her own. At 30, Claire met Derek. He was handsome in that polished, calculated way. Expensive suits, perfect teeth, cold eyes that assessed everything like he was appraising assets. I felt uneasy the first time I met him, but I told myself I was being overprotective. Thomas felt it too. The night after that first dinner, he said, "That man doesn't love our daughter. He loves your bank account." I dismissed it. I said we barely knew him. I said Claire deserved happiness and I wasn't going to sabotage it with my paranoia. But Thomas was right. Thomas was always right. They married 6 months later. I paid for everything. The venue that cost more than my first boutique, the destination rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon in Bali, 300 guests who drank champagne that cost more per bottle than I used to make in a week at the flea markets. Claire looked beautiful. Derek looked victorious, like he'd just closed the deal of his life. They had twins a year later, Sophie and Lucas, my grandchildren. I loved them instantly and completely. I thought maybe motherhood would change Claire, would give her purpose and responsibility. But she stopped working the moment Sophie and Lucas were born. Derek didn't work either. They lived entirely off the money I gave them. And I kept giving because I wanted my grandchildren to have stability and comfort and opportunity. Then Thomas got sick. Lung cancer. Aggressive. Brutal. The kind that doesn't negotiate. Doctors gave him 8 months. He fought for 13. And I watched the strongest man I'd ever known waste away to nothing while Claire barely showed up. The first 2 weeks, she came to the hospital regularly. After that, visits became sporadic. Excuses piled up like unpaid bills. The kids had activities. Derek had business meetings that never seemed to produce any actual business. Traffic was terrible. Thomas never complained. He'd just squeeze my hand when I'd tell him Claire couldn't make it, and I could see the disappointment in his eyes that he tried so hard to hide. The night before Thomas died, he was barely conscious, but he gripped my hand with surprising strength and said, "Helen, promise me something." I told him anything. Anything in the world. He said, "Don't let them do to you what I know they're going to try. Don't let them take advantage of you. You have to be stronger than your love for them." I asked him what he meant, but he just squeezed my hand tighter and closed his eyes, and the next morning he was gone. At the funeral, Claire sobbed louder than anyone. Derek stood beside her with his hand on her back, playing the supportive husband. Sophie and Lucas were confused, too young to understand their grandfather wasn't coming back. I was shattered, completely broken. And that's when the nightmare truly began. The first months after Thomas died were unbearable. The house felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Every corner held memories. His coffee mug still in the cabinet. His books on the nightstand. His cologne lingering in the closet. I didn't know how to exist without him. The business kept running because I had excellent managers, but I'd lost all motivation. Claire started visiting more frequently. At first I thought it was because she was worried about me, because she was finally stepping up as a daughter. She'd say, "Mom, you can't be alone like this. Come live with us. We'll take care of you. The kids need their grandmother close. I resisted. I told her I needed space to grieve, time to process. But she persisted. Derek, too. Helen, the house is too big for one person. You're rattling around in there like a ghost. We have plenty of room. Let us help you. Finally, I gave in. Not because I really wanted to, but because the loneliness was killing me, and I thought being near Sophie and Lucas would help me heal. I sold the house Thomas and I shared for 35 years. Every room held our history, and I couldn't bear walking through it alone anymore. I moved into Claire and Derek's home in their wealthy suburb, a house I'd helped them purchase, by the way. At first, everything seemed fine. Sophie and Lucas were excited. We played games. I read them stories. I took them to the park. Claire and Derek seemed attentive, almost doting. But slowly, gradually, things began to change. First, it was small things. Claire asked me for money for groceries. I gave it to her without question. Then she needed money for car repairs. Then for the kids' tuition. Then for house maintenance. I gave and gave and gave. They never paid me back, never provided receipts or explanations. And when I finally asked where the money was going, Claire looked at me with irritation and said, "Mom, are you seriously going to mistrust your own daughter now?" Then the rules started. I couldn't use the living room because Claire had just cleaned it. I couldn't cook because I made too much of a mess in her kitchen. I couldn't watch television after 8 because the noise disturbed the children. I couldn't invite friends over because, as Derek told me directly, without shame, it wasn't my house. That last one, he said, while looking me straight in the eye, daring me to challenge him. I tried talking to Claire about it. She said Derek was stressed, that I should be more understanding, that I needed to be flexible. Flexible. I, who had worked 40 years so she'd never know poverty, was being told to be flexible in the house I helped them buy. But the treatment was worse than the rules. Claire began speaking to me with open contempt. If I asked her for something, she'd sigh heavily like I was the greatest burden she'd ever carried. If I offered an opinion, she'd snap, "Mom, just let us live our lives." If I wanted to spend time with Sophie and Lucas, she'd say they had homework or activities, and I was disrupting their routine. Derek barely acknowledged my existence. He'd spend hours on his phone or watching television, and when I tried making conversation, he'd answer in grunts and single words. The kids started changing too. Sophie stopped running to hug me when I entered a room. Lucas stopped asking me to play. I'd see Claire whispering to them, see the way their expressions shifted when they looked at me, and I knew she was poisoning them against me. One afternoon, I overheard Claire on the phone in the kitchen. I was walking past, not intentionally eavesdropping, but her voice carried. She said, "Don't worry, Mom won't last much longer. When she's gone, everything will be ours." I almost convinced her to sign the papers yesterday. Derek's lawyer has everything ready. I froze in the hallway. My heart stopped. My blood turned to ice. This was always the plan. I was never a mother to be cared for. I was an asset to be liquidated. That night, I tried confronting Claire. I told her we needed to talk, that it was urgent. She said she was tired. I insisted. She exploded. "God, Mom, enough. It's always about you. You're not the center of the universe anymore. You're just—" She stopped herself, but I knew what she was about to say. A burden. I was a burden. Derek came out of the bedroom with a false smile and said, "Helen, go to bed. Claire's had a long day." I stood there speechless. My daughter, my only child. The girl I'd sacrificed everything for had just dismissed me like I was nothing. The next morning, Claire entered my room without knocking. She was holding papers, legal documents. She said, "Mom, we need you to sign these. It's to make everything easier when you pass. You know, so the inheritance goes smoothly to me and the kids. It's what's best for everyone." I told her I wasn't signing anything without my lawyer reviewing it first. Her face hardened. The mask slipped. "So you don't trust us? After everything we've done for you? After we took you in? Ungrateful." She slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. That afternoon, I returned from a doctor's appointment and found my room had been ransacked. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered everywhere, my wallet emptied, documents missing, Passport, gone. Driver's license, gone. Banking information, gone. I went downstairs. Claire and Derek were in the living room. I asked what happened to my room. Claire said she'd cleaned it. I told her important documents were missing. She said I was confused, that I probably misplaced them myself. Derek looked at me and said, "Helen, you're getting old. Memory fails sometimes. It's normal." Something inside me broke. This wasn't confusion, this was calculated. They'd stolen my identity. Late that night, I heard voices from the living room. I crept down the stairs. Claire and Derek were on a video call with someone, a lawyer from what I could gather. I caught fragments of their conversation: mental incapacity, senile dementia, conservatorship, asset control. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. They were going to take everything, lock me away somewhere, and there wouldn't be a damn thing I could do about it because they'd stolen my documentation and soon they'd steal my legal rights. My heart pounded so violently I thought I'd have a heart attack right there on the stairs, but I couldn't make noise. I couldn't let them know I'd discovered their plan. I went back to my room. My hands were shaking. I needed to leave immediately, but how? I had no cash, no identification, no cards that worked because Derek had either blocked them or drained them. Where would I go? How would I survive? Then I remembered something. After Thomas died, I'd boxed up his personal belongings: his watch, his cufflinks, his reading glasses, his notebooks full of business calculations, and his wallet, that brown leather wallet he carried every single day. I'd never opened it, because it felt like reopening the wound of losing him. But that night, desperate and terrified, I pulled the box from the back of my closet. I opened his wallet with trembling hands. Inside was his driver's license with his face smiling back at me, a photo of us on our 30th anniversary, a note I'd written him years ago that said "Thank you for choosing me," and a bank card, an old debit card from an account I didn't recognize. It was expired according to the printed date, but sometimes banks renew them automatically. Sometimes they keep working. It was my only chance. At 4 a.m, when everyone was sleeping, I packed a small backpack with a few clothes. I took Thomas's wallet with that card inside. I took one photo of Sophie and Lucas, and I walked out of that house without making a single sound. I closed the door gently behind me and walked down the dark suburban street with no plan, no destination, just survival. I walked for 2 hours through neighborhoods I didn't know. Dawn was breaking when I reached downtown. I found an ATM outside a closed cafe. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I inserted Thomas's card with shaking hands. The screen lit up. "Enter PIN." I didn't know it. Thomas had never told me about this account. I tried our anniversary date. Incorrect. I tried Claire's birthday. Incorrect. One more wrong attempt and it might lock forever. I tried my own birthday. The screen changed. "Welcome." I couldn't believe it. It worked. The card actually worked. I selected check balance, and what I saw made my knees nearly buckle. $547,000, over $500,000. How? Where did this come from? Thomas never mentioned this account. We shared everything. What was this? I withdrew $200, the maximum allowed. The bills came out. Real, tangible. I clutched them like a lifeline while tears poured down my face. Thomas was taking care of me. Even 4 years after death, he was saving me. I found a small hotel downtown. Paid cash. The clerk looked at me strangely, an elderly woman with no luggage arriving at 7 a.m, but she gave me a key. I locked myself in that room, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. But I knew this was just the beginning. I needed answers. I needed to understand where that money came from. And I needed a plan because Claire and Derek wouldn't stop. They'd search for me. They'd hunt me down. They'd try to finish what they started. 3 days I stayed in that hotel room, barely eating, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound in the hallway. But on the 3rd day, I made a decision. I couldn't hide forever. I needed to go to the bank. I needed to face whatever truth was waiting there. I walked into that bank on the 3rd day with Thomas's card clutched in my hand like a talisman, and when the manager looked at his computer screen, his face drained of all color. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. He said, Mrs. Wright, your husband left very specific instructions. He knew this day would come. He knew they'd betray you. And that's when I realized Thomas had been playing chess while I was playing checkers, and he'd made moves 4 years ago that were only now revealing themselves. The bank was enormous. All glass and steel and marble floors that echoed with every footstep. I felt small walking through those doors. An old woman in wrinkled clothes carrying a backpack like a homeless person. I approached the customer service desk, where a young woman in a crisp blazer smiled that professional smile they teach in training seminars. I told her I needed information about an account and handed her Thomas's card along with my old driver's license, the one document Claire hadn't managed to steal because I'd hidden it in a book months ago. The woman took the card, swiped it, and her smile faltered. She typed something, frowned, typed again. Her fingers moved faster across the keyboard, and I watched her expression shift from professional courtesy to confusion, to something that looked almost like alarm. She glanced up at me, then back at the screen, then up at me again. "Ma'am, excuse me for just one moment, please," she said, and there was a tremor in her voice that made my stomach drop. She stood and walked quickly to another desk where a man in a gray suit was reviewing documents. They spoke in whispers, but I saw them both look at me. The man picked up a phone, made a call, and within seconds 2 more employees joined the huddle. All 4 of them kept glancing in my direction while having an increasingly animated conversation. My heart started racing. This was it. They were going to tell me the account was fraudulent, that I'd committed some kind of crime by using a dead man's card, that the police were on their way. I considered running, actually calculated how many steps it would take to reach the door, but where would I go? I had nowhere left to run. Then a man in a navy suit approached me with purpose in his stride. He was maybe 50, silver hair, sharp eyes that had seen everything. "Mrs. Wright?" he said, and I nodded, because my voice had abandoned me. "My name is David Brennan. I'm the branch manager. Would you please come with me?" It wasn't really a question. I followed him through the bank, past curious stares from other customers, into a private office with a door that closed with a heavy, final sound. He gestured to a leather chair and I sat, gripping the arms like I was bracing for impact. David sat across from me, folded his hands on the desk, and studied my face for what felt like an eternity. "Mrs. Wright, I need to confirm something. You are Helen Wright, wife of Thomas Wright, who passed away 4 years ago." I managed to whisper yes. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file folder. "Your husband was a very intelligent man, and he clearly loved you very much." He opened the file and I saw Thomas's handwriting on documents, his signature on papers I'd never seen before. David continued, "This account was created by your husband 7 years ago. He deposited money into it monthly for 5 years. Money that came from the portion of business profits you allocated to him for his financial consulting work. He never touched a penny. He invested it carefully, with our best advisors, and he left very specific instructions." David pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across it, in Thomas's distinctive script, the same handwriting that used to leave me love notes in my lunch bag when we were young. "He said to give you this only if you came here alone, without your daughter, with this specific card. He said if that day came, it meant you were in danger. It meant everything he feared had come true." My hands shook so violently I could barely take the envelope. David stood. "I'll give you privacy, Mrs. Wright. Take all the time you need." The door closed behind him, and I was alone with my dead husband's words. I tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter, and Thomas's voice filled my head as clearly as if he were sitting beside me. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, then what I feared most has finally happened. Claire and that man have betrayed you. You're alone, and I'm not there to protect you. Forgive me for keeping this secret, but I knew you wouldn't understand while I was alive. I knew you'd fight me on it, because you love our daughter with a fierceness that blinds you to what she truly is. This money is yours. It's ours. I saved it from the consulting fees you paid me over the years. I invested it, carefully. I hid it because I knew someday you would need it. I knew Claire wouldn't change. I knew Derek was a predator. I knew they would wait until I was gone and then they'd come for everything you built. Helen, Don't let them destroy you. Don't forgive betrayal just because it wears your daughter's face. Blood doesn't justify cruelty. Love doesn't excuse abuse. You taught me to be strong when I wanted to give up on my dreams. You taught me that dignity matters more than comfort. Now I'm asking you to be stronger than you've ever been. Use this money wisely. Hire the best lawyer in the state. Protect your assets. Fight back with everything you have. And please, my love, don't surrender your dignity just to keep the peace. I love you. I've always loved you. And from wherever I am, I'm still watching over you. Yours forever, Thomas. I wept, sobbed so hard my entire body shook. The tears I'd been holding back for 4 years. Through Thomas's death and Claire's betrayal and 3 days of terror in a hotel room, all came pouring out in that private office. Thomas had known. He'd seen what I refused to see. He'd prepared for this exact moment. He'd saved me from beyond the grave. There was a soft knock on the door, and David returned carrying a box of tissues and a bottle of water. He didn't speak, just set them on the desk and waited while I pulled myself together. When I could finally breathe again, he said, "Your husband also left instructions that were to help you with whatever you need. Legal assistance, financial planning, asset protection, anything. What do you need, Mrs. Wright?" And I heard my own voice, stronger than it had been in months, say, "I need a lawyer, the best one. I need to get my life back. I need my daughter to understand her mother isn't the fool she thinks I am." David nodded and picked up his phone. He called someone, explained the situation in careful terms, and when he hung up, he said, "Her name is Danielle Owens. She's the best family law attorney in the state. She can see you today at 3. It was barely 10 in the morning. 5 hours. In 5 hours, my counterattack would begin. But first, David and I had work to do. We spent the next 2 hours in that office going through every account I had, every card, every authorization. I discovered that Claire had access to 2 of my business accounts because I'd given her authorization years ago when Thomas was sick and I needed help managing payments. I'd forgotten to revoke it. Or maybe part of me hadn't wanted to because revoking it meant admitting I didn't trust my own daughter. That mistake had cost me dearly. David pulled up transaction histories and my blood turned cold. Claire had withdrawn $180,000 in 6 months, nearly $200,000. There were charges for luxury trips, designer stores, car dealerships, jewelry stores. My money funding her lifestyle while she treated me like garbage in her home. But it got worse. David found something else. Mrs. Wright, there was an attempt 3 weeks ago to take out a loan using one of your commercial properties as collateral. A loan for $1.2 million. I stared at him. What? I never applied for any loan. He turned the monitor so I could see. According to this, the application was submitted by Claire Wright, claiming to have power of attorney. The bank that received the application flagged it because the documentation was incomplete. They requested additional verification and never received it, so the application was denied. But Mrs. Wright, your daughter attempted to saddle you with over $1 million in debt. The room spun. Claire had been willing to destroy me financially, to burden me with debt I couldn't repay, all to maintain her parasitic lifestyle. This wasn't just theft. This was calculated destruction. David's voice brought me back. We need to act immediately. We need to revoke all her access. Freeze these accounts. Change all your passwords and security codes. And we need to document everything for your lawyer. We worked through lunch. David brought in 2 other bank officers and a notary. I signed document after document, each one severing Claire's access to my money, my accounts, my life. With each signature, I felt a little more of my power returning. By 2 o'clock, it was done. Claire couldn't touch a single penny of my money ever again. David walked me out personally. Before I left, he handed me a burner phone. Your lawyer might need to reach you, and you said your daughter has your regular phone. Use this. It's prepaid and registered to the bank, completely untraceable to you. I thanked him, but the words felt inadequate for what he'd done. He'd treated me with dignity when I felt like I had none left. He'd believed me when he could have dismissed me as a confused old woman. At exactly 3 o'clock, I walked into the offices of Owens and Associates. The building was a downtown high-rise with a view of the entire city. The reception area was all dark wood and leather furniture, the kind of place that screamed money and power. I gave my name to the receptionist, and within minutes a woman emerged from a hallway. Danielle Owens was maybe 42, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like armor, with sharp eyes that assessed me in one sweep. She extended her hand. "Mrs. Wright, come with me, please." Her office overlooked the city, but I barely noticed the view. She gestured to a chair across from her massive desk and sat down, pulling out a legal pad. The bank manager gave me a brief overview. "But I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small or painful it seems. I can only help you if I know the complete truth." So I told her. Everything. Thomas's death, moving in with Claire, the financial abuse, the rules and restrictions, the contempt and cruelty, the stolen documents, the overheard conversations about having me declared incompetent, the plan to institutionalize me. I showed her Thomas's letter. I gave her my account numbers and the transaction histories David had printed. I explained about the attempted loan fraud. My voice shook through parts of it, broke entirely through others, but I got it all out. Every humiliating, painful detail. Danielle took notes without interrupting. When I finally finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and fury. "Mrs. Wright, what you're describing is elder abuse, financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud, potentially attempted unlawful conservatorship. Your daughter and son-in-law could face serious criminal charges if we pursue this fully. But I need to know what you want. Do you want to recover your money? Do you want to press charges? Do you want to ensure this never happens again? Or do you want all of the above?" I thought about Thomas's letter, about his plea for me to be strong, about Sophie and Lucas, growing up thinking it was acceptable to abuse elderly family members for money. "I want justice," I said. "I want every penny back. I want to make sure they can never do this to me or anyone else again. And I want to protect my grandchildren from learning that this behavior is acceptable." Danielle smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. "Then let's go to war." The plan she laid out was comprehensive and brutal. First, we'd revoke all powers of attorney, which we'd already done. Second, we'd request emergency certified copies of all my identification documents and invalidate the stolen ones. Third, we'd hire a private investigator to document exactly where my money went and whether there were other schemes I didn't know about. Fourth, we'd file a civil lawsuit to recover all stolen funds. And fifth, we'd file a criminal complaint with the district attorney for elder abuse and fraud. But there was one more thing. Danielle leaned forward. "Mrs. Wright, if your daughter was planning to have you declared incompetent, she may have already started that legal process. We need to find out immediately, and we need to get ahead of it with our own expert evaluations proving you're in complete possession of your mental faculties." The thought that Claire might have already filed paperwork, might have already set that nightmare in motion, made me nauseous. But Danielle was relentless. "I know the best psychological and medical experts in the state. We'll have you evaluated within 48 hours. We'll have documentation that you're completely competent. And if she's filed anything, we'll destroy it in court." Before I left her office that day, Danielle made 3 more calls. One to a private investigator named Marcus Cole. One to a doctor who could do a comprehensive medical evaluation. One to a psychologist who specialized in competency assessments. She scheduled everything for the next day. Then she told me the hotel wasn't safe. "If your daughter is looking for you, hotels are the first place she'll check. We have a furnished apartment the firm keeps for clients who need protection during difficult cases. It's secure, quiet, and nobody will find you there." She handed me a key and an address. "Go there tonight. Rest. Tomorrow we start building your case." That apartment became my war room. Small but comfortable, with locks on the doors that actually made me feel safe. That night I lay in an unfamiliar bed staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, clutching Thomas's letter like a shield. I thought about Claire, about the little girl who used to crawl into my lap and fall asleep while I read her stories, about the teenager who'd screamed that she hated me over some trivial argument and then apologized with tears an hour later. about the young woman who'd asked me to walk her down the aisle because her father was too sick. Where had that person gone? Or had she ever really existed? Had I been so blinded by love that I'd invented a daughter who was never real? The next morning, Danielle called at 7. "Mrs. Wright, get dressed. Marcus found something. You need to come to my office now." The urgency in her voice sent ice through my veins. I was there in 30 minutes. Marcus was waiting, a solid man in his 50s with cop eyes that had seen humanity's worst. He had a folder on the table. "Mrs. Wright, I've been tracking your daughter's financial activity for less than 24 hours, and I've already found things that are going to make you sick. Are you ready?" I nodded, even though I wasn't ready. Nobody could be ready for what he showed me next. He opened the folder. Bank statements showing my stolen money spent on trips to Miami, Las Vegas, Napa Valley, luxury resorts, 5-star restaurants. A brand new Range Rover purchased 6 weeks ago. Designer clothes from stores I'd never even heard of. Sophie and Lucas's private school tuition, yes, but also thousands in special donations to ensure they got preferential treatment. Every dollar was mine. Every purchase was my sweat and sacrifice being pissed away on their entitlement. But Marcus wasn't done. "That's not the worst part," he said, and pulled out photographs. My son-in-law Derek at an expensive restaurant. But he wasn't with Claire. He was with another woman, maybe 30 years old, beautiful and glamorous. They were kissing, holding hands, looking at each other the way people in love look at each other. More photos. Derek entering a downtown apartment building with this woman. Leaving hours later, Derek buying her gifts at jewelry stores. "Mrs. Wright, your son-in-law is having an affair, and he's funding it entirely with money he stole from you." The room tilted. Derek was cheating on my daughter, using my money to wine and dine his mistress while Claire abused me in their home. The irony was almost funny. Almost. "There's more," Marcus said grimly. "I found communications between your daughter and her brother. His name is George Miller. He has a criminal record. Fraud. Extortion. He served 5 years in prison and was released 3 years ago. He's been advising Claire on how to handle you." He showed me screenshots of text messages recovered from cloud backups. George to Claire, "Make the old woman sign the papers. If she resists, there are other ways to handle difficult situations. I know people." Claire to George, "She's being stubborn." "What kind of people?" George to Claire, "People who run private care facilities, the kind that don't ask too many questions. You get her declared incompetent. I'll make sure she's placed somewhere she can't cause problems. Nobody will find her." I couldn't breathe. They were planning to disappear me, to lock me in some unlicensed facility, probably medicated into submission, hidden away where nobody would ever find me. My own daughter, my own blood, was planning to erase me from existence. Danielle's hand was on my shoulder. "Mrs. Wright, breathe. This is horrifying, but it's also perfect evidence. This isn't just financial abuse anymore. This is conspiracy to commit unlawful imprisonment. This is serious criminal activity. We have them." That afternoon, Danielle filed a formal criminal complaint with the district attorney. She presented every piece of evidence. The bank statements, the photos of Derek's affair, the text messages planning my institutionalization, the attempted loan fraud, all of it. The district attorney agreed to open a full investigation. Danielle also filed for an emergency restraining order. Claire, Derek, and George were now legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or any of my properties. The war had officially begun. But wars have casualties, and I was about to discover just how dirty Claire was willing to fight. 2 days later, my burner phone rang. Unknown number. I answered and heard my grandson's voice. "Grandma, is this you?" Mom gave me this number and said to call. My heart shattered. "Lucas, sweetheart, how did you get this number?" His voice was small, scared. "Mom found it somewhere. She told me to call and tell you we miss you." "Grandma, why did you leave? Are you mad at us?" Tears burned my eyes. "No, baby, never. I'm not mad at you or your sister. I love you both so much." Then I heard Claire's voice in the background, hissing instructions. Lucas continued, clearly coached. Mom says you're trying to take our house. She says we're going to be homeless because of you. She says you're being mean." I heard Claire take the phone. Her voice was syrupy, sweet, performed for some imagined audience. "Mom, the children miss you so much. They don't understand why their grandmother abandoned them. Don't you think this has gone far enough? Can't we talk like adults and resolve this?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "Claire, you stole from me. You abused me. You planned to have me locked away. There's nothing to resolve." Her voice dropped the pretense, became cold and sharp. "You're going to regret this. You're going to end up alone with no family and no one who loves you. You're destroying your own grandchildren's lives because you're a selfish, bitter old woman." The line went dead. I immediately called Danielle. She was livid. "She's using the children as weapons, and she somehow got your burner number, which means she has connections or resources we didn't anticipate. We need to document this call. And, Mrs. Right, I think we need to do something you're not going to like. I think we need to fight for custody of your grandchildren." The words hit me like a physical blow. Take Sophie and Lucas away from Claire. Destroy what was left of my family. But what kind of grandmother would I be if I let them grow up learning that abusing elderly people for money was acceptable? What kind of future would they have watching their mother's cruelty and their father's infidelity and their uncle's criminality? "What would that involve?" I asked. Danielle explained. "We'd need to prove Claire and Derek were unfit parents. We'd need psychological evaluations, home studies, documentation of the toxic environment. We'd need to show the children were being emotionally manipulated and used as pawns. It would be brutal and public and would burn whatever bridges remained. But Mrs. Wright, those children are being raised by people who plan to institutionalize you for money. What kind of adults will they become if they learn that behavior is normal?" She was right. She was absolutely right. So we filed for emergency custody evaluation. The court agreed to appoint a child psychologist to interview Sophie and Lucas and assess their home environment. Claire's response came within hours. Her lawyer filed a motion claiming I was mentally unstable, that I'd abandoned the family without explanation, that I was using false allegations as revenge for imagined slights. The court date was set for 2 weeks away. 14 days to prepare for the fight of my life. 14 days knowing my grandchildren were being poisoned against me. 14 days wondering if I was doing the right thing or destroying my family forever. But then, Marcus found something else. Something that changed everything and proved just how far Claire was willing to go. He showed up at my apartment late one night, which was unusual because Marcus was always professional and scheduled. His face was grim. "Mrs. Wright, I found communications between Claire and her brother George that you need to see immediately. They're planning something for the custody hearing. Something designed to make you look unstable in front of the judge." He showed me more recovered messages. George to Claire, "Get someone to testify she's erratic. Pay them if you have to. Get her medical records and doctor shop until you find someone who'll say she has dementia. Bring the kids to court crying. Make it look like she's terrorizing them." This was beyond betrayal. This was warfare. And I realized something in that moment. Claire didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as an obstacle to be eliminated by any means necessary. The courtroom was silent when the judge finally spoke, and her words would either save my grandchildren or destroy what was left of my family forever. But before I tell you what she said, I need you to understand something. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we die to protect, and the hardest battle isn't fighting them. It's accepting that we have to. So let me ask you this, and really think about it while I tell you what happened next. When does a mother stop being a mother? And when does a daughter stop deserving that title? The custody hearing was scheduled for 9 in the morning on a Tuesday in late September. I barely slept the night before. I kept imagining Sophie and Lucas being questioned by lawyers, being forced to choose sides, being traumatized by a battle they didn't start and shouldn't have to fight. Danielle had prepared me extensively. She'd explained that the judge would review all the evidence, interview the children privately, and assess whether Claire and Derek's home was genuinely harmful or whether I was, as Claire's lawyer would argue, a vindictive old woman using the legal system for revenge. At 8:30, Danielle and I walked into that courthouse together, and I felt like I was walking toward either salvation or damnation, but couldn't tell which. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, wood-paneled and formal with fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly unreal. Claire was already there with Derek and their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s who radiated expensive competence. Claire looked haggard, I'll admit that. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that hadn't been styled with her usual care. Part of me, the part that would always be her mother, wanted to ask if she was okay. But then she looked up, saw me, and her expression twisted into something ugly and hateful, and that impulse died immediately. Derek sat beside her, scrolling through his phone like this was an inconvenience rather than a battle for his children's future. Their lawyer leaned over and whispered something, and Derek finally put the phone away, but not before I saw his jaw clench with irritation. This man couldn't even pretend to care about his own kids for one morning. Judge Margaret Rivera entered, and we all stood. She was a woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie humanity could manufacture. She sat, arranged her papers, and looked over her reading glasses at all of us. We're here regarding the petition filed by Mrs. Helen Wright for custody evaluation of minors Sophie Wright and Lucas Wright, currently in the custody of their mother Claire Wright and father Derek Wright. I've reviewed the initial filings from both parties, and I have to say, this is one of the more disturbing cases I've encountered. Let's proceed. Claire's lawyer stood first. She painted a picture of me as an overbearing, controlling mother who'd always resented Claire's independence. She claimed I'd used money to manipulate my daughter her entire life, that when Claire finally set boundaries, I'd retaliated by making false accusations. She presented the situation as a tragic misunderstanding, a grief-stricken widow who'd become paranoid and was now tearing apart her own family. It was a masterful performance. I'll give her that. She made me sound like a villain. Then Danielle stood up, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She presented everything. The bank statements showing $180,000 stolen over 6 months, the photographs of Derek's affair and the money spent on his mistress, the text messages between Claire and her criminal brother George planning to institutionalize me in an unlicensed facility, the attempted loan fraud that would have saddled me with over $1 million in debt, the stolen identification documents, the recorded phone call where Claire used Lucas to emotionally manipulate me. Danielle presented it all methodically, calmly, letting the evidence speak for itself. By the time she finished, Claire's lawyer looked like she'd been hit by a truck. The judge's expression had gone from professionally neutral to barely contained fury. Judge Rivera turned to Claire. "Miss Wright, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you withdraw funds from your mother's accounts without explicit written permission?" Claire's voice shook. "My mother gave me verbal permission. She wanted to help with the grandchildren's expenses." The judge looked at the bank statements. $180,000 for children's expenses? That includes luxury trips to Las Vegas and Miami. Claire's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Claire said, "We took the children on educational trips, family vacations. My mother approved." Judge Rivera's voice could have cut glass. "And the $45,000 spent at luxury hotels and restaurants while your husband was with another woman? Was that also for the children?" The courtroom went dead silent. Claire turned white. Derek shifted in his seat. Their lawyer looked like she wanted to disappear. I didn't know about that," Claire whispered. The judge wasn't done. "What about these text messages discussing placing your mother in an unlicensed care facility against her will?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Those messages were taken out of context. My brother has problems, yes, but I never seriously considered that. I was just venting frustration." Judge Rivera removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose like she was developing a headache from the sheer audacity of what she was hearing. "I'm going to speak to the children now, privately. Everyone else will wait here." She stood and left through a side door. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Claire cried quietly. Derek stared at the wall. Danielle squeezed my hand once, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than she knew. I prayed. I'm not particularly religious, but I prayed anyway that Sophie and Lucas would tell the truth, whatever that truth was. When Judge Rivera returned, her expression was carefully neutral, which terrified me more than anger would have. She sat, folded her hands, and addressed the courtroom. I've spoken with both children at length. They're intelligent, articulate kids who clearly love all the adults in their lives, which makes this situation even more tragic. They expressed confusion about why their grandmother left. They expressed fear about losing their home. They also expressed, and this is important, that they witness frequent fighting between their parents, that they've heard their mother say negative things about their grandmother, and that they feel caught in the middle of something they don't understand. She paused, consulting her notes. However, I also found no evidence of physical abuse or immediate danger in the current home. The children are fed, clothed, attending school, and receiving adequate care despite their parents' obvious dysfunction. My heart sank. She was going to deny my petition. That being said, the judge continued, and I held my breath. I am deeply troubled by the evidence of financial elder abuse, emotional manipulation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. While the children may not be in immediate physical danger, they are being raised in an environment where criminal behavior toward a family member is normalized. That concerns me greatly. Judge Rivera looked directly at me. Mrs. Wright, I'm not going to grant you full custody. These children need stability, and removing them from their home, their school, their friends, would be traumatic regardless of their parents' failings. However, she turned to Claire and Derek. I am ordering the following. Mrs. Helen Wright will have unsupervised visitation with her grandchildren every weekend from Friday evening to Sunday evening. This is non-negotiable and will begin immediately. Second, both parents will attend mandatory family therapy sessions twice weekly for a minimum of 6 months. Third, a social worker will conduct monthly home visits to ensure the children's well-being. Fourth, any evidence of parental alienation, any attempts to turn the children against their grandmother, will result in modification of custody. And fifth, the criminal proceedings regarding elder abuse will continue separately from this family matter, and I will be monitoring that case closely. She brought down her gavel. This hearing is concluded. Claire stood up so fast her chair fell over. This is insane. You're punishing me for trying to help my mother. She's manipulated everyone, including you. The judge's voice could have frozen fire. Miss Wright, I suggest you sit down and be grateful I didn't remove your children from your custody entirely, because the evidence presented today was more than sufficient to do exactly that. Another outburst. And I'll hold you in contempt. Claire sat, shaking with rage or fear, or both. Derek had his head in his hands. Their lawyer was already packing her briefcase, clearly eager to escape this disaster. Danielle and I left the courtroom together, and when we got outside I realized I was crying. Not from sadness, from relief. I hadn't won everything, but I'd won what mattered most. The right to be in my grandchildren's lives, the right to show them that there was another way to be human besides what they were learning at home. That Friday evening I picked up Sophie and Lucas for our first overnight visit. Claire opened the door, wouldn't meet my eyes, handed me an overnight bag with their clothes and medications. They need to be back by 7 on Sunday, not later. Her voice was flat, defeated. I'll have them back by 6, I said, and took my grandchildren's hands. Sophie was quiet in the car. Lucas stared out the window. I didn't push them to talk. I just drove to my apartment, the one I'd been renting since this nightmare began, and when we got inside I said, "Are you guys hungry?" I was thinking pizza. That broke the ice. Kids are remarkably resilient. By the time we were eating pizza on the living room floor because I didn't have a proper dining table yet, they were starting to relax. Lucas asked, "Grandma, why did you leave?" And I'd prepared for this question with Danielle's help. I said, "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and hurt each other. Your mom made some mistakes that hurt me, and I made mistakes too. But the important thing is that I love you both so much, and I'm always going to be here for you no matter what." Sophie, who was always the more perceptive one, said quietly, "Mom says you're trying to take us away." I looked at her, this beautiful 9-year-old who'd been put in the middle of something she should never have to navigate. "Sophie, I'm not trying to take you away. I just want to be your grandmother. I want to spend time with you. I want you to know you're loved." She thought about that. "Okay," she finally said, and went back to her pizza. That weekend, we played board games. We watched movies. I showed them old photo albums with pictures of their grandfather, Thomas, told them stories about him they'd never heard. Lucas was fascinated by the idea that his grandfather had been an accountant. "That sounds boring," he said with the brutal honesty of a 9-year-old. I laughed. "It does, doesn't it? But Grandpa was special because he saw beauty in numbers. He said every business was like a puzzle, and he loved solving puzzles." Sophie asked to see pictures of her mom as a kid. I showed her photos of Claire at her age, and Sophie said, "She looks happy there." Yes, I thought. She was happy once, before entitlement and resentment poisoned her. But I didn't say that. I just said, "She was, and she loved you both before you were even born." When I took them back Sunday evening, they hugged me tight before running inside. Claire took them without a word and closed the door. But it was a start. It was a foundation. The criminal case moved slowly, as these things always do. Over the next 6 months, more evidence came to light through Marcus's investigation. He discovered that Derek's mistress knew exactly where the money was coming from and had actively encouraged him to take more. He found records showing Claire had attempted to access my business accounts multiple times after being blocked, trying different passwords and security questions. He uncovered emails between Claire and George, discussing not just institutionalizing me, but potentially having me declared dead, which made me physically sick to read. Danielle presented everything to the district attorney, who upgraded the charges to include conspiracy to commit identity fraud and attempted conservatorship fraud. Claire and Derek both hired expensive criminal defense attorneys. George disappeared, apparently fleeing the state to avoid prosecution. The case was building toward a trial that would likely take years to fully resolve. But something interesting happened during those 6 months. Claire's marriage imploded. The affair became public knowledge. Derek moved out, and divorce proceedings began. Claire had to get a job, an actual job for the first time in over a decade, and ended up working retail at a department store. She moved from the large house I'd helped them buy into a small 2-bedroom apartment. Sophie and Lucas had to change schools. Their entire life was disrupted, and while part of me felt vindicated, another part, the part that would always be a mother, felt sad. Not sad enough to forgive her. Not sad enough to give her money or help her out of the hole she'd dug. Just sad that it had come to this. Sad that she'd chosen this path when so many better ones had been available to her. My relationship with Sophie and Lucas deepened. Every weekend they'd stay with me, and gradually they started opening up about what life was like at home. The fighting between Claire and Derek before the divorce, the tension afterward, the way Claire would sometimes cry for hours. They weren't reporting this to hurt their mother. They were just kids trying to process trauma they didn't understand. I listened. I comforted. I didn't badmouth Claire even when I wanted to. I just tried to be a stable presence in their lives, a safe harbor in their storm. Sophie started talking about wanting to start a small business, selling handmade jewelry. I helped her research how to do it, taught her about pricing and profit margins, explained the basics of running a business the same way I'd had to learn them 40 years ago. Lucas discovered he loved reading, particularly adventure stories, and every weekend we'd go to the bookstore and pick out new books together. These children were becoming their own people I genuinely liked and respected, and that felt like a victory far more important than any court ruling. 9 months after the custody hearing, the civil lawsuit was settled. Claire and Derek agreed to pay back every penny they'd stolen, $180,000 plus interest and legal fees. They had to sell assets, borrow from family, set up payment plans, but they paid. It took them nearly a year to complete the payments, but every dollar returned felt like a small restoration of justice. The criminal case took longer. Eventually, nearly 2 years after that morning, I escaped with nothing but Thomas's wallet. Claire and Derek both pled guilty to reduced charges: financial exploitation of an elderly person, conspiracy to commit fraud. They received probation, community service, and permanent criminal records. George was eventually arrested in Nevada on unrelated charges and extradited back to face charges related to his role in my case. He went to prison for 3 years. And me? I restructured everything. I created an irrevocable trust for my business and assets with myself as the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. Upon my death, the trust would distribute funds to Sophie and Lucas when they turned 25, with conditions. They had to complete a 4-year degree or vocational training. They had to work and support themselves for at least 2 years. They had to demonstrate financial responsibility. Only then would they receive their inheritance. Claire was disinherited entirely. Derek had never been in the will to begin with. I made sure everything was documented, witnessed, legally bulletproof. No one would ever be able to manipulate me or my assets again. I also did something I'd never done in my entire life. I stepped back from my business. I promoted my longtime managers to leadership positions, set up proper operational structures, and transitioned into a consultant role. For the first time since I was 19 years old, I wasn't working 70-hour weeks. I had time to breathe, time to heal, time to actually live instead of just surviving. I started painting, something I'd loved as a teenager but abandoned when survival became more important than creativity. I traveled, taking trips to places Thomas and I had always talked about but never visited. I made new friends, joined a book club, volunteered at a women's business center helping young entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes I'd made. I built a life that wasn't defined by work or by my daughter's betrayal. I built a life that was mine. Claire and I don't speak. We've crossed paths at Sophie and Lucas's school events a handful of times over the past few years. We nod politely. We don't make scenes, but we don't have conversations either. She's made no attempt to apologize or reconcile, and I've made no attempt to reach out. Maybe one day that will change. Maybe when enough years have passed and enough healing has happened, we'll find a way to have some kind of relationship. Or maybe we won't. Maybe some betrayals cut so deep that the severed bonds can never be repaired, only accepted and mourned. I've made peace with either possibility. I don't spend my nights wondering what I could have done differently or blaming myself for how Claire turned out. I did my best with the understanding I had at the time. The choices she made as an adult are hers to own. Sophie is 14 now, Lucas is 14, and they're remarkable young people. Sophie's jewelry business has grown into a real enterprise. She sells at local craft fairs and online, and she manages her own finances with an attention to detail that would make her grandfather proud. Lucas is an artist, creating elaborate fantasy worlds in his drawings and talking about maybe studying animation in college. They split their time between Claire's apartment and my place. And while I know they love their mother, they've also learned what healthy boundaries look like. They've learned that love doesn't mean accepting abuse. They've learned that family isn't about obligation, it's about mutual respect. And they've learned these lessons while they're young enough for them to shape the adults they'll become. That matters more to me than any amount of returned money or criminal conviction. About a year ago, I was cleaning out some boxes and found one more envelope I'd missed before. It had been tucked into a book, one of Thomas's old ledgers I'd stored away. The envelope said, "Open when you've survived." My hands trembled as I opened it, and Thomas's voice filled my head one more time. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, you did it. You fought back. You survived. You reclaimed your life. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I know it hurt. I know you lost our daughter in the process, or maybe you finally saw who she really was. Either way, you had to choose between losing her or losing yourself, and you chose yourself. That takes a courage most people never find. Don't let this make you bitter. Don't let betrayal turn your heart to stone. Forgive if and when you're ready, but never forget. Love deeply but wisely. Set boundaries and defend them. Family isn't determined by blood. Family is determined by who respects your soul, who values your presence, who treats you with the dignity every human being deserves. You taught me that through your actions, through the way you built a business on integrity and treated your employees like family. Now, I want you to live, Helen. Really live, not just survive or work or sacrifice. Live with joy, live with purpose, live with your head high and your heart open to the people who deserve it. I love you. I've always loved you. And wherever I am, whatever comes after this life, I'm still watching over you and I'm still proud. Yours forever, Thomas. I sat on my apartment floor and cried, but they were different tears than the ones I'd shed in that bank office 3 years before. These weren't tears of grief or fear. These were tears of gratitude. Gratitude that Thomas had loved me enough to prepare for the worst. Gratitude that I'd found the strength to fight. Gratitude that I'd survived and built something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. Gratitude that I still had Sophie and Lucas in my life. Gratitude that I was alive and healthy and free. Today, I'm 67 years old. I live in a comfortable apartment with paintings on the walls that I created. I run a successful business that doesn't consume my entire existence. I have grandchildren who visit every weekend and who are growing into thoughtful, ethical people. I have friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I have peace, not the peace of resolution or reconciliation, but the peace of knowing I defended my dignity when it was under attack. The peace of knowing I chose myself when choosing myself was the hardest choice available. The peace of knowing that while I lost my daughter, I saved myself and possibly saved my grandchildren from becoming what she became. So, let me end by asking you something. And I really want you to engage with this question because your answer matters. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace with family and defending your own dignity? Have you ever been in a situation where love and self-respect were pulling you in opposite directions? And if you have, what did you choose? I want you to share your story in the comments right now. Not someday, right now. Because someone else reading this might be facing that same impossible choice, and your experience, your wisdom, your story might be exactly what they need to hear to find the courage to choose themselves. This isn't just entertainment. This is a community of people who understand that sometimes the family you have isn't the family you deserve, and that it's okay to walk away from toxicity even when it wears the face of someone you love. So tell me your story. Tell me what happened when you had to choose. Tell me if you have regrets or if you'd make the same choice again. Tell me if you're still in the middle of that battle and need support. And if my story helped you in any way, if it gave you courage or validation or just made you feel less alone, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because the algorithm doesn't just show content to people randomly. It shows content that people engage with. And if you engage, if you like and comment and share, then someone else who's being abused by their own family might see this story and realize they're not crazy, they're not ungrateful, they're not the villain. They're just someone who's finally had enough. And that realization might save their life the way Thomas's preparation saved mine. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community. Now go tell me yours. I'm reading every comment. I'm here. And so are thousands of other people who understand exactly what you're going through. You're not alone. You never were. Now prove it by sharing your truth in the comments below.